Second sticks.
Second sticks. Mark.
Ready?
All right.
All right. When did you get the impulse to work visually and advocate for Native people?
It took a long time. I feel like, painter is always painting. I mean, you stop it and say, that's a painting, and you exhibit it, you might sell it or something, have it collected. But you're on this path of the visual language that you're creating.
This is kind of a heavy question. How do you hold the traumatic history and maintain your own mental health?
As an artist of color, you have to really face up to what's happened and what continues to happen. History is how we're remembered, and often it's, as the cliche says, it's written by the victor, and that's been a huge problem, where it tells their story, his story. It doesn't tell the truth.
Right.
So we did kind of a digital diagram, and then I came in and wrote each tribe, and there's 5 colors of red.
And this is the first time we've seen this.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would be your advice to artists, especially younger artists who want to be more activist or have social ideas about the world and through their art? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, it's very easy in a sense, or direct, is that you deal with your community. Buffalo, New York, comes from a French word that they use, which is bon fleur, which is beautiful water, and they couldn't pronounce that, so they called it a buffalo, and there's no buffalo in Buffalo, So often these names that America has are all mistaken words that were mispronounced. So it's good to go back and maybe address that with the community of indigenous people to see what the real words were, because all the rivers had native names, and from different tribes, the names were diverse. So the Kiowa would call this river a certain name, the Cheyenne would call it a certain name. And I find that fascinating, that the names can be variable. So that's up right now at the art museum. One like it. So this is an older one. This is 2000. Mm-hmm. So that was 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
At OU.
Yeah.
That was definitely one of the first that I really saw of yours out.
Yeah.
In the world. Yeah.
And we had some of these too, like the art school would have benefit auctions or sales, and no one ever buy these.
Nobody.
Oh no.
Nobody bought them.
No. And they were like so cheap, and almost like giving them away, and now they're $30,000 now.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the size of your work. You've done everything from billboards to site-specific public art with signage. Your paintings are quite large, and now your monoprints, once they're assembled, will be quite large. Can you talk about size with your work?
Yeah, what scale really helps, and today we're in kind of a peculiar place in that, architecture has become museum language. And so previously, as you know, the museums were homes. Now they build you a place for art. So it's bigger.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And they ended up using the airline craft wire on the top.
Okay.
So going to the support beam. And then on the bottom, they used, like the suction cups
Yeah.
for glass.
And that's their birthday, that year.
The player's birthday?
No, the chief.
The Chief's birthday.
Yeah,
That's a lot of work to find that birthday.
yeah. He was on those, in Fort Marion, that Peabody collected those masks, and so I found his mask, and then they had his date of his birth on there. And Sundown, that's his birthday on there. He was Seneca guy.
And where the whole team had them, do they still have them now? Or
These?
yeah, whoever was playing that game.
I think they gave them some, the kids and stuff. There's some little ones, and that was kind of their keepsake from coming to hang out with us.
Yeah, that's cool. Who won?
I don't know who. The Cheyennes won, of course. Who else would win? Who else would win?
Do you feel like you have to be pretty inflammatory as an artist to gain
Yeah,
recognition?
I think it helps, Whenever my public art's more like that. So if I am inflammatory, I'm in the newspaper, I'm on the TV, So you actually use the media to extend your message, that way. So that's happened many times. Although I don't try to really be in your face, But it's interesting what's happened with the Washington football team, the Cleveland baseball team. I mean, we've been fighting that. I was working on that in the 90s, and the team changed their names. Was thinking it would never happen.
He's your grandmother.
Yeah, it's Lightning Woman made these. My mother, Margaret, Heap of Birds. These are really old. Probably like 50 years old or something. Maybe.
And that's, what hide is that?
I think it's a buckskin. Yeah, it's important to try to stick with that. I mean, they've had, I don't know if it's expediency, but sometimes they jump over to another tribe, they can make the moccasins. But then you got like Kiowa moccasins, you got Cheyenne moccasins. You need to have your own tribe on your feet. Not just, is it a moccasin? No, you need to be your tribe, know the difference. And so it's very important to recover that history and make some adjustments, modifications. Take it, upon yourself to really create a better history, a more illuminated history about life and the earth. Public art comes out of that tradition of being, generous. Going back to even Mexico, the muralists, my heroes, Siqueiros, Diego, and I've been to their studios in Mexico City and Cuernavaca, and I really admire what they gave to the world in terms of muralism and muralists. Often it's like it's an art venue, where you come and you present your work in a space. You think about it, you might diagram it, you might plan for it, even execute in the studio.
Talking again about your billboards and your signs and your site-specific work versus work that's put into a museum, are the audiences the same or are they different?
No, they're different. I think I feel strongly about being ready for every man, every woman. On the street, being free.
This is camera A. Okay.
White hat, short woman, standing above. I really like the standing above, kind of maybe on a cloud or up above us, kind of a lofty position.
Edgar, these are the primary prints, so this is the first print that comes off the printing press, right?
Well, you have the plate, and it's a plexi plate, and then I've done a treatment to it when it was inked up, and then we'll pull one print off of the plate, and that's termed a primary print. That's what that is. All these are family members and extended family, going back could be like 100 years or something, you know. So Bear Shield is an uncle of mine. And there's some other Bear Shields too. So a Bear Shield, then Flying Coyote, an elder. And we used to go see him in Wichita, Kansas. Elliot Flying Coyote, great old guy that I knew when I was a kid. And Wichita was where a lot of the tribe went to go to work. Lone Woman, Eagle Head is Mahnemik. And that was actually, this person was actually at Fort Marion in prison, POW, after the Washita Massacre here in Oklahoma. And then Thunderbolt, they were related to my grandmother and my grandfather, and we lived with Thunderbolts, and actually my uncle married a Thunderbolt. So Howling Water, that was related to Heap of Birds also. And Owlet Woman was actually a grandma, you know. She married a star with 2 R's. And then Sage Woman, Stone Road, my grandmother was related to them. And All Runner, also, I knew that family too. Around Clinton, Oklahoma, so the western part of the reservation. Then I picked color as well, so we have all blues. And the blue always comes forward as a way to think about renewal, the water. You know, so I see this as a exercise or an achievement towards preserving all these names. You know, youthful people come to see the show here in Oklahoma City. They're going to be able to kind of digest this history,
Right.
and log into it in a way. And maybe if they're lucky, they might bring their grandma with them. So there's always this rich kind of experience where it's not just about just a name, you know, it's a person, it's a family. Little Woman, Walking Coyote, Young Bird, you know, there's young birds around today. So Bull, Telling Tales, Sweetwater, the Sweetwaters are still here. There's one in Wichita, he's a chief actually. Chips, Coho, this is Comanche, and that's actually in Cheyenne. So Comanche, hail. Hail is important because it's cold in the summer, you know. So some of the ceremonies deal with hail if you're hot. You know, White Antelope was one of the chiefs that was killed in the massacres too. So White Antelope is kind of a sad name because of the massacre, you know. So there's antelopes now, and I think by some kind of process they drop the white, so you're not associated with the death of the chief, you know. White Antelope. And Old Bear was an older man that I knew when I was a kid, Cheyenne, and out in the country. A bull looking around, man on a cloud. And so my grandmother, Alice Redbird, Heap of Birds, and her Cheyenne name dealt with lightning woman, Hoitzio. So she had a lot of names because she had a lot of families and stuff. So it's a big long cadence. And then Black Wolf he's an elder who's in the poster, and he was a headsman of the Elk Scraper Society. So he led the Warrior Society. He was one of the leaders of the Warrior Society that fought in all these battles, and later kind of repaid Custer with his death in Little Bighorn. So the Elk Society was there in Montana, and now I have taken his position in the teepee as one of the leaders of the Elk Society. You know, so where the old man was, my grandpa's dad. Now I have that job, you know. And then Howling Crane goes with redbird because my grandmother was actually a redbird howling crane. She's also a lightning woman. So that's kind of all like in the same family, all those three names. Wondering about them,
Right. Maybe you'll learn more stories.
Yeah, and share them, with their own family members, So Singing in the Water, red painted woman. And the first way it was translated was as Many Magpies. Then it became, when he was a POW in Florida, and it was Heap of Birds, then later Heap of Birds. And actually my dad was Many Magpies. His Indian name, they call it Indian name, they gave him that name. So he was Many Magpies, Heap of Birds, or Charles, Heap of Birds. And Sore Woman, that's also a grandma that my dad knew. My daughter has that name. Hoetziol is the name. And it's actually when lightning strikes, there's a charge in the earth, and when they connect, then you get the lightning bolt. So it's actually about this power coming and touching the earth. Then you get this spark. So lightning woman, milkweed is an old name too, and that's my name, Hockey, Little Chief. Yeah, this Little Chief. And there was Little Chief. My uncle was Little Chief. He was Edgar, and then his great uncle was in Fort Marion as a prisoner of war, and he was Hockey too. But he got to come home. He survived the prison. Moving behind is pretty important. She was actually a survivor at the Washita Massacre, and they hid in the grass, her and her mother, and they heard all the screaming and all the death going on with the soldiers, and they got to walk away because they were in the tall grass, the buffalo grass. And so that was a metaphor I used a lot, as I was coming along as an artist, and that provided us survival, the grass, but we can't hide it anymore. We should quit hiding. Like, no one should hide anymore, but it did provide survival, initially. One of the new tribal administrators is an Okrom at Concho, Oklahoma, I believe. In Yellow Hair, there was actually a community hall by Gary, Oklahoma, where they had all the powwows and stuff. And it was called Yellow Hair Hall, And the gentleman that owned the property was a Yellow Hair. His name was Gus, and we went to a lot of dances there when I was in my 20s. So they're also kind of like destinations too, if they name things after your name.
Right.
Yeah. Standing Water, they're out by Elk City in Hammond, Oklahoma, and a lot of things that happened out there is very tragic. When Custer annihilated the tribe, he took the women and children and took them to Kansas in wagons and showed everybody his trophies. And then he had his own brothel. Even when they camped, he had a sergeant or something that took care of making a brothel out of the Cheyenne women's lives. And then they were raped over and over. And when they got done sort of showing off his slavery, they were delivered back to the reservation. And then so there's all these young babies that came from Kansas, and I got to know some of them as elderly women who were like 80 years old, and they were light-skinned women that spoke only Cheyenne, and it was very dubious, troubling. Were they accepted? Did they come up forward and confront the brutality and all these things? And so it reminds me of that time, some of these names. And people, of course, they're still recovering from that.
From the trauma,
Yeah. A name earlier was Owlet Woman, and Owlet Woman married Starr, and I knew Starr, and I knew his son, was Moses Starr Jr., and Orange, but that's a writer today. He's a pretty popular author. I think he's a novelist. He's shot in Arapaho, and his name's Orange. Women Going Uphill, and that's Arapaho land by my mother's. Sun Bear. I'll move that one over. Blue sky is Wootgim, and it's actually a sky that's made in the ceremony. You know, it's with heat. That's someone from the blue sky, but the name is Wootgim. And then Cayes is an old chief that my dad knew, who actually practiced native medicine, you know, and he's buried in Clinton. Sun Bear is my brother, and then Wootgim is my son. So kind of the family of going back to my brother, and then now today to my son, and then going back to my father's grandpa. Like, so it's sort of like these like 3 or 4 generations of history. And over here on this side, we have the first ghost. The same plate sitting on the press. It hasn't been reworked. There's no more ink put on it, you know. So there's a certain amount of ink left on it, you know, from when you pulled the first print. So with that residual ink, you can pull another print like this. We use a different kind of paper. See, so there's a brown, you know. So that's come from my process of wanting to make a ghost and to keep a ghost. I've actually been doing it so long now, for maybe 5 or 6 years, ghosting, that I found beauty in the ghost. You know, I find beauty in the misunderstood print. So I use different kind of paper to make it even more beautiful.
The next one is,
It's gonna be this one.
okay.
And I will double check for you.
There you go.
So in my 70 years on this planet, I feel really just happy that I'm able to extend that. You know, I've learned, and I continue to learn, and I'm here to transmit that to tribal members and help them attain these ways so that they can transmit them.